that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom. Get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. And whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on, for they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble, for they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence, but the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. My son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them and healing to all of their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet. Then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. This is the word of the Lord. You know, I have been thinking a lot about parental advice because a lot of my friends, the first wave of my friend group this year, had their children, their eldest children, go off to college. And so I've had the joy over the fall and into the Christmas season of meeting parents and children and seeing all of the pictures and the remembrances of summer vacations, of family wisdom, of trips to Target, and then over the Christmas season, having these young people come home after they had gone off to college and interacting with them, as it dawned on them that the house that they grew up in would always be their home, but slowly and surely something had happened. Now they were young adults. Now they were going off to school. Now they had been released to dream and to hope and to soar into their future as young adults. And for the parents, they had to entrust that the 18 or 19 or 20 years of training that they had poured into these young people would give them the wisdom that they needed to succeed and to grow into people of faith, to grow into civically minded adults, to grow into young adults who are finding their place in this world, finding what it meant to love God, love others, and serve. And that's a pretty remarkable thing to see as an outside observer. So I've been thinking a lot about the power of parents in our lives, and this strikes me as something that's really tender and resonant in light of recent events, and I didn't mean it to be, but it really strikes me as powerful, the wisdom that passes from one generation, from father to son, from mother to daughter, and how we communicate and pass our faith on. and how we wrestle with these age-old questions as to what does it really mean to get wisdom? What does it really mean to live the good life? How do we even define what wisdom is? Well, the Bible, of course, has a lot to offer us on this, has a lot to say about this subject of wisdom. And so do lots of other philosophers and teachers throughout the course of time. And so I was thinking about all of these things this week, and I happened to be doing a hospital visit at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Medical Center, and I saw on the wall something that had been there for a very long time, but this week I really saw it, and it was a quote by Aristotle that says, "Excellence is an art won by training and habituation. We do not act rightly because we have virtue or excellence, but we rather have those because we have acted rightly. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." And I got to thinking about that because the quote is on the wall at the Air Force Base Hospital, and it greets anyone who happens to be there throughout the day. Well, I found myself pondering a couple things. One, I wonder how many hospitals throughout the country have something attributed to Aristotle on their walls, something encouraging us to strive for wisdom, to strive for excellence. I wonder how many corporations, I wonder how many civic groups have something that reminds us or has us thinking day in and day out about these really important life issues like gaining wisdom. But after I started thinking about that, it occurred to me that it makes sense. It makes sense for civil servants in the military to be focused on gaining wisdom. These are part of our core values. And it makes sense to be thinking about what does it mean to live a self-sacrificial life. It makes sense to be thinking about principle and personal integrity and putting those things ahead of personal gain. But our own faith tradition also has a lot to say about this, that we are stakeholders in this conversation, and that we have some things to share with the public square. And so after I pondered Aristotle's really interesting quote about wisdom and about excellence being something that you repeatedly do, something that is a habit, I started to think, well, I wonder if this isn't also a really lively conversation in our own Bible between biblical authors, and I wonder if there aren't lots of voices that want to contribute to this conversation and teach us what wisdom is. So we have this passage here in Proverbs that I'm going to keep coming back to, but we also have in the book of Philippians 4:8, there's an injunction telling us that whatever is beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is anything excellent or worthy of praise, that we're to think on those things. And so as I got to thinking about this, it occurred to me that a lot of the folks who are people of faith, who were in the Jewish tradition and later in the Christian tradition, were contemporaries with these great philosophers, with the Aristotles and the Socrates, who got in school, and they were getting God's wisdom from the Holy Spirit and bouncing it off against these philosophers. And so we have Aristotle here saying that excellence is what you do over and over and over, that it is right behavior that makes you virtuous. And then we have Philippians, which I think is maybe offering us a different nuance, saying, no, what you put into your mind, how you think, how you process, how you engage, what you allow your mind and heart to think on, those things form you, form who you are. So there's, I think, some conversation happening back and forth between these things. And then in our own Bible, we move to the book of James in chapter 2, which tells us, what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and eat your fill, and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself if it has no works, is dead. But someone will say, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith apart from your works, and I, by my works, will show you my faith. Well, that to me sounds a little bit like someone who was sympathetic to Aristotle's camp on what wisdom is and what wisdom means. And I don't necessarily think that either of these biblical authors was wrong. I think they're telling us pieces of what wisdom is and what wisdom means. So I think James is reminding us that what we do is a part of what wisdom is. It's a part of what makes us virtuous, that how we engage with the world around us forms us and informs us as Christians. And I think Philippians is telling us that what we put into our hearts, what we put into our minds, that does matter, that is the building block, that is a foundation of God's wisdom. What we meditate on, what we praise, what we dwell upon also informs what wisdom is. So before I get too far down this path of what wisdom is, I should probably talk for a minute about what wisdom isn't. And this is really important because we have a media and we have a culture that is just itching to tell us what worldly wisdom is, and it doesn't comport with what the Bible tells us that wisdom is. So, you see, wisdom is not the same thing as an IQ score. Wisdom is not the same thing as how you perform on a standardized test. Wisdom is not your college GPA. Now, for any college kids here, that doesn't mean you can't try hard or shouldn't try hard, just to say that God's wisdom isn't necessarily how you do on an IQ test. Wisdom is not whether you attended an Ivy League college. Wisdom has a lot to do with living our lives well, honoring God, being in right relationship with God, with our neighbors, with our church community, being a blessing to the people around us. And here's the really great thing about wisdom. There's no cap on how much wisdom you're allowed to receive from God. You can keep growing in wisdom forever. In fact, some would say, and by some I mean the lady standing in the pulpit, that gaining wisdom and living into wisdom is a part of Christian discipleship, and that it is a lifelong process that we get to engage in. Wisdom, the task of gaining wisdom, is our lifelong calling. And wisdom is available to all. It does not discriminate. You can make $25,000 a year or $10,000 a year as a minimum wage worker and be wise. You can make $30 million a year as the CEO of a very important multinational conglomerate and be wise. There's no limit and limiter on your ability to grow in God's wisdom. In fact, the God who loves you and thinks you are wonderful and made you wants to give you wisdom. There's a store of wisdom, of God's wisdom, available to all. And all we have to do is in earnest and in humility ask for God to teach us. Join community. Now, I moving from there, now that we've talked a little bit about what wisdom is or how we're defining it this morning, I want to go into teaching mode and point out a few things. I mentioned earlier that I shared a quote from Aristotle. That matters because these biblical authors, these people of faith, were contemporaries within a couple hundred years of some of the great philosophers. And so they were working out through the Holy Spirit, what does wisdom mean in our lives of faith? And they were having conversations with the great teachers and philosophers of their age. But I want to point out something else. I want to go back to the passage I first read in Proverbs. I want to give you all some insight into how maybe a pastor looks at a passage. And as I was reading and meditating and praying over this passage, something that really struck me is that wisdom writing is different than other kinds of writing. It's different than history. It's different than a 3-point sermon. It's different than other kinds of writing, and it's meant to appeal to lots of our senses. So if you go back in your own prayer and devotional time this week, you'll notice that this passage is really earthy, that it appeals to our senses. There's a lot of talk in this Proverbs passage that has to do with our five senses. For example, wickedness is directly compared to excess or gluttony. We eat the bread of wickedness. And perhaps that's meant to show that some people eat to excess, or that they eat more than their fill, or that they don't care to see or aren't able to see others around them in need. We drink the wine of violence. This passage says we drink the wine of violence. And that metaphor was really powerful to me, because I don't know if anyone here has seen someone who's intoxicated, who's violent or angry or ill-tempered or impulsive, but I have. Unfortunately, working with the military, I've seen some guys and gals come back from war scenarios and process the trauma of war through alcohol and drugs, and there's a recklessness and there's a self-centeredness that happens when we drink to excess. And I've also seen that with juvenile delinquency and other people who are dressing up wounds that they have in their lives through these inappropriate means, through drugs and alcohol. But when we drink the wine of violence. There's also an admonition in this passage to listen to the teachings of wisdom. There's a metaphor that appeals to our eyes. And this metaphor was also very striking to me. So wickedness is compared to total darkness. Has anyone been lost in the woods at night? Has anyone had that sinking feeling of being just absolutely lost and not knowing where you are, not knowing where is up and where is down and where is right and where is left? What was that like, to be lost? It's terrifying. Right. Righteousness in this passage is compared to the dawn. Now, I don't know, myself am not an early riser, but I'm wondering if there might be a few early risers here. Do I have my early risers? Talk to me about what dawn is like. What is dawn like when you watch the dawn? It's beautiful. Exactly. Dawn is beautiful. There is just this beautifully diverse color palette that washes over the sky. It's almost like God has pressed a reset button every morning, that whatever happened the day before, whatever took you to sleep, whatever was present in your mind, that every morning you get to start anew, a reset button has been pressed, and that dawn, every day, from the dawning of time, there are new colors in the sky. There's a slightly different variation of color in the sky, that God is a master artist, and that dawn stands out amongst the rest of the day as particularly beautiful, as particularly hopeful. And in this passage, that is what righteousness is compared to. It's compared to the waking dawn. There's also an idea in this passage that we're to look to particular places for wisdom, and maybe not so much to other places. We're to look straight ahead. We're to walk a particular path. We're to control our feet and keep them on the right path. And I think ultimately what this is all about, you see, I think there's this notion in some circles that wisdom is a head thing. And I think there's this notion in other circles that wisdom has a lot to do with what you do. It's a justice thing. It's a help these poor people, help this group, help that, do this, do that. And I think maybe the fusion of the two, the combination of the two, is really where God is leading us. And the children's sermon actually sort of got to the conclusion of where I want to go with our conversation about wisdom this morning, in sharing the great commandment, the greatest commandment, that we're to love God with all of our hearts, with all of our minds, with all of our souls, and with all of our strength, that this is the first and greatest commandment, and all the others hang on this command. So what I want us to be thinking about as we look at Proverbs and as we look at passages on wisdom is that the purpose of wisdom is about more than just going out and being do-gooders. It's about more than just about right beliefs or cerebrally what we know. to be true about God, that the purpose of wisdom, in concert with discipleship, is total life transformation. To borrow sort of more common or contemporary language, it's a total person makeover that God is asking of us, and wisdom is a part of this, that it captures our heart, that it captures our mind, that it captures our soul, that it captures our spirit, that it empowers us and nourishes us and sends us out also to do good in the world. Wisdom necessitates a total coming together of heart, mind, soul, and body, unified for God's purpose. So I want us to kind of dwell on what it means to ask for and receive that kind of wisdom from God. And I'm going to close this sermon maybe with an invitation more than a neat and tidy answer. Friends, who in your life, as you meditate and as you reflect, who do you see that is exemplifying wisdom, God's wisdom? Now, don't call them out or name them, but I want you to sort of ponder these folks in your mind. Who are people that have impressed you in their love for the Lord? Who are people who are maybe not the most powerful in the community, maybe not the wealthiest, but the people who are the most rich in generosity and caring, the people who have lived their lives quietly and faithfully for the Lord? Who do you know that just radiates the love of God in their character, inspires you in your walk of faith? Befriend these people, learn from these people, pursue these people, grow with these people, and here's the kicker. Here's the really hopeful part that I want to share. All of us are on a journey. All of us have been commissioned to God. We are these people. We are on a journey growing in wisdom for God. And we are also on the journey of sharing wisdom with those that need it, with those that invite us to, with those that we're able to minister to. So get wisdom at any cost. Get wisdom. And then when you have some wisdom to share that wisdom with others. Amen.
Let us all rise and sing our responsive hymn.